Hello everybody, welcome to another impromptu video. This time I'm going to be reacting to the awards ceremony which was presented on last Sunday, presented by Amiga Bill.
That's a really good one. Alright, this one's very unique, and it's done by a very good friend. Yo, Nagram, thank you for the resub. Everyone go follow Nagram. He's a great streamer here on Twitch as well, and the CEO of the Norwich Amiga user group. Dan, you know what? I feel really bad because I didn't give your game a rating. I get dope. This happens to me sometimes. I play the game, I didn't give it a rating. We played it on stream, and I love it. Life School. Life School is one of the leaders of lemonamiga.com. ! Lemon in the chat to get your fresh squeezed Amiga goodness. It's the ultimate website for Amiga games. They have a great community over there. And Dan is the man. He's been a guest on my stream. Dan, you rock, brother. It's great to have you here.
It's a different Lemon though. There's no connection between the two.
Oh yeah, exactly. There's lemonamiga.com. There's Dan from lemonamiga.com, and then there's Dan from Demo Group Lemon.
So yeah, this presentation was RJ Michael, you can see listed on the screen, Bolt from the Amigos podcast, and Dan from Lemon, the Demo Group, which does get a bit confusing, but I think Lemon have been going a long time. I used to have loads of their demos, and obviously it's a party, so people can join and leave it, so people post under that banner still today. So I haven't actually heard of Dan before, but I have played some Lemon graphics demos before. So you can see at the bottom as well, Amiga Cami from Australia is keeping scores on the Cami Cam. You can see with the Amiga Addicts and everything else on there, which is very nice. Love to see those monitors. And Amiga Bill, of course, in the top corner. So today they're going to be judging my game HAMmurabi, and you can see my first comment, oh god, not this shit, 0.0 score, crisis wasn't suitable. So what happened was, as soon as I heard about the compo, I spent months creating my crisis game, and then when it wasn't suitable, unfortunately, I had to create this HAMmurabi game, which was put together in a couple of weeks. So the one that I really wanted to submit for the competition, full motion video shooting game, unfortunately wasn't accepted. So I ended up putting this together, cobbled this together in a few weeks. So I didn't really put much stock behind it winning the competition with all these other actual great games. So it was just meant to be a me too kind of include kind of thing, where I just put something down and created something for the competition. So Graham Humphrey used to run the Super League competition, which I'm now running on Lemon Amiga. So great to see Graham represented in the comments.
easily to get confused there.
there's no connection yet, but maybe one day.
Yeah, maybe. Let's take a look at this rad game, HAMmurabi. Saberman with the video. Life School does really interesting stuff. He's pushing the Amiga to new limits with a lot of his motion graphics. There at lemonamiga.com, baby. Woo. Keep up the great work, Life School.
was the introduction to my game. It's great to see everybody attentively watching that happily, and definitely I regard that as the best part of the game. So let's check out the comments. Nagram, CEO of the Norwich Amiga Group. Edvin Helland, who I presume sounds like maybe a Swedish or from Denmark. Hi, Amigos Retro Gaming. So that's both of course from Amigos. Amiga Nick, Lemon Rules, definitely does. Pred says Lemon Corp, that's us. Both Rules, Brother Bill, linking to lemonamiga.com. Amiga 500 XT says RJ Michael also created the Atari links to 3DO, PlayStation 3 I think, PSP 2. I'm not sure about the final two. He definitely moved to Google very recently. And a smiley from Saverman, who's created this video. Mike Smith, who Amiga Bill calls Mick Smith, no idea which one it is. Have the two Dans been seen in the same room at the same time together? No, maybe with the same guy, but I don't think he speaks with a northern accent quite like I do. This intro is the only good bit from Life School. That's me. Looks sweet from Steve D4. Very welcome, Steve. Thank you very much. Edvin Helland also says, I hope RJ can pull some AI plugs before he leaves Google, because RJ is responsible for creating all this AI stuff. As far as I know, this image in the background was not AI, although I could be wrong. This looks like it's been hand-drawn simply because the perspective of the box in the background is huge compared to everything in the foreground, which is, well, it's the same size, so it looks like a human being did that. And there's no way you can see these tiny boxes in the background compared to these ones. Probably a computer wouldn't do that. But we saw some AI kind of, well, not AI, computer-generated images in the introduction. So yeah, I hope he can pull some AI before he leaves Google. Unfortunately not. Acid Bottle says, hey Life School, you do good, great stuff dude. Alright, great. Acid Bottle is the winner of the competition. He created the Dizzy game. I've always been a massive fan of the Dizzy games. So I guess the Dizzy game's one of the reasons why I nagged my mum for a Commodore 64. So you could say Dizzy is a big part of why I'm here at the moment. Aspal deserved to win with this game. It's the only one that was anywhere near finished and to a good quality. And Brother Bill says hold and modify. That's this ham mode that we're using at the moment, which means it's fairly blurred on this output. Maybe, but yeah, it's at least got the colours. You can see that font is pretty difficult to read, particularly because it's scrolling up the screen. None of the fonts that I used in the actual game I was ever happy with, but they kind of do the job. It's pretty difficult to read any of them throughout the entire game, unfortunately.
I see that ham fringe in there, Life School. He made this all with Can Do. Oh, I love the fringing. HAMmurabi on the Comic 64 made in BASIC. This is super cool. Dan even did a port of Crisis to the Amiga. Believe it, believe it. All right, Boat. What are your thoughts on HAMmurabi?
You know, Bill, I'm not what you call aged. I'm a spring chicken. I haven't been around that long. You know, I did not grow up playing basic games in 1978. So this type of a game just has limited appeal to me. I reach a point in the history of retro games where I'm just like, this is my line, and beyond this line, I shall not cross. So, you know, I appreciate the intro. It's clear that there's a lot of work that went into the intro. It's very similar to the intro of what you get when you launch a recent Civilization game. I like the fact that he included the original game from 1978. But playing this game, I didn't really even feel like I was playing the game. I felt like I was doing my taxes, Bill. It was no good. It was no good. So it's not Dan's fault. He was just making the game that was there. But yeah, I did not enjoy this one at all.
Fair play, Boat. I guess you never played Zork?
Well, that's definitely a point of view if you haven't been brought up with these text adventures, these text-based games, and you might wonder why you still type things in on a keyboard when I could have simply put a load of boxes on the bottom. How much money did you spend? 5, 10, 15, 20, all the way up, and you can simply click on the items rather than having to type anything in whatsoever. But maybe I didn't think of that. So yeah, moving back to the questions now. Hold and modify. Made with can do, I say. Voxel Tross at Amiga Bill. I wonder if RJ back in the day ever imagined full screen video on the Amiga. That's definitely a question, and he'll be reading that out shortly. Brother Bill, hi Voxel Tross. Full screen video is really impressive, definitely impressive. By the way, it's now raining here in Lancashire, one of the most rainiest parts of the country, and this country is one of the, well, it's up there with the rainiest parts of the world. It's not quite the rainiest, unfortunately. So full screen video is definitely impressive. So if you can hear any pops and clatters, it's basically the rain. Amiga Nick says, Pred said at Lemon Amiga demo you did at Revision was the best, man. One of the greatest OCS demos I've seen. No idea if Pred said at Lemon Amiga actually created a demo for Revision. He was there, but I've no idea if he created a demo. I doubt it. Maybe he's getting the two guys mixed up. Anyway, Steve4D says, D4, so cool music. Cool music. Well, I'm kind of off and on about the music. Some of it's very atmospheric. It's supposed to be like Lionheart with the big theatrical, operatic lightning crashes and big dramatic build-ups and slowdowns and harmonies and tilling the fields and that kind of thing. And I went somewhere towards the operatic, big dramatic feel with the music, of which there are 3 different tracks, and the music is actually 16 track. It's at least an 8-track music thing, which music on the Amiga is usually 4. So the fact that I used 8-track music means I had to use an external music player, which is, you know, rare. Most Amiga tracks are only 4, so that went on behind the scenes. Not that that was very apparent that it's 8-track music, but I did actually go to those lengths. So if you like the music, I'm kind of off and on about it. Sometimes I love it, sometimes I hate it. So that's good. I played HAMmurabi, says Pred said, on the Commodore 64, made in BASIC. It wouldn't surprise me because the original HAMmurabi was definitely ported to a whole load of computers. And so a long time ago in 2019 I was working for the Gracious Films outfit, and we were working on the history of video games, TVOG, TEVOG. And fortunately, even though hundreds of thousands was poured into the history of video games project, it eventually collapsed, and so all the preparation work for that was lost and we're not allowed to use it anymore. But this is something that I came up with to explain the video game family tree, and I really do apologise that it's really hard, difficult to read it, unfortunately. But this is, I think, the final version of the tree that I was working on, and I was working on this at the same time as Matt Barton was also releasing a book with a video game family tree within it. I sent this off to him, and hoping that he didn't think that I was plagiarising his work, because I've never actually read his book. And I think I sent this to him just as he was editing it, so hopefully we'll have both got things fairly similar. And you can see that most genres are here, including demos and graphics demos. We've got Mortal Kombat and the fighting games, Tomb Raider and the adventures, Broken Age, Broken Sword, all the graphic adventures, the Final Fantasy series, and then in the middle you've got Elder Scrolls, World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, all these RPGs, and then the trading games, Minecraft, Warcraft, Elite, Sims, Ace Combat, Flight Simulator, World of War, World of Tanks, World of WRC Racing, World of F1, whatever it is, F1 2012, and the tennis games as well. So you can see right up at the top there was a chess game released, which appears to be the very first game ever, and then that led to Turbo Champ, and then the Whirlwind 1 with its bouncing ball created a whole load of things. The Nim on the Ferranti machine, which came from Manchester, created all other things. The Etzac machine created an OXO game, which created all other things. And the Midsac computer had a pool game on it, which went to a whole lot of other things. So you can see from Turbo Champ, the family tree does go all the way down through OXO, which is a basic tic-tac-toe kind of game, and then through the Pilot Ace computer with drafts, and then after that it splits off into Hunt the Wumpus, and then it also splits down into HAMmurabi. So we'll just zoom in slightly on that line. You can now hopefully see it a bit clearer. So Hunt the Wumpus is kind of a forerunner to RPGs, and that spawned something called Future War and Mario and Dungeon as well, and they went onto the mainframes and things like that. But HAMmurabi spawned Empire on the mainframes, which was a space trading game, and that went down to Conquest, and through Lemonade Stand and Mule we eventually get to Sim City, because Mule was kind of a city, kind of a landscape thing, and then SimCity took it to another level, and then you've got Populous, The Sims, Minecraft on that level. And then from Empire we got Conquest, which fed into Mule, and also Civilization, which is where we get the multiplayer games like Command and Conquer and Dune 2, but also Civilization games, Age of Empires, that kind of thing, Command and Conquer, Warcraft, all these real-time RPGs, stuff like that. And then we come to Star Trek, that goes into the space stuff. So you can see right at the top, HAMmurabi was actually, well, it's not, I suppose you could say that it was one of the first trading games, because that also involved things like the RPG elements in these other games. So you could say HAMmurabi influenced a good few things on this list, including perhaps Star Trek as well, which took it to the next level, and then Star Trader and Elite Dangerous and all the rest of it. So you could say HAMmurabi definitely was a pillar of that kind of environment in society. And you can see on the Exidy Sorcerer machine there is a version of HAMmurabi, and if we just skip through this footage, it's a basic game created in BASIC, and you can see that I've kind of left the border on there as well. A lot of computers with green screen back in the day. So City Sorcerer has its own version of HAMmurabi, of course, and back in the day, in the very first computers, 78, 79, HAMmurabi was the height of computerdom, of course, on those platforms, because they didn't have much else. Now let's take a look at the Sol 20 computer, which also got a version of HAMmurabi, and this is version 2. You can see it's got a different introduction, welcome to the village and things like that. It's got a different HAMmurabi says listed on that, but it's still the same questions. How much land do you want to buy? How much land do you want to sell? How much bushels do you want? How many acres to plant with bushels? How much land do you wish to buy? And then after you've done all that, it says, right, now let's move on to the next year. And then after all that, well, I've changed the colour to white in this case. It moves on to the next year, and then it says, right, well, this is how much you've got left now. So that's on the Sol 20 computer, and here we are again on the TRS-80 basic Radio Shack TRS-80, the Radio Shack 80 column computer. So becoming ancient Sumeria, it was also known as the Sumer game, and also Kingdom as well, on various other different computers. So it was known under quite a few names, and you can see this has got a different layout as well. It was on every computer back in the day, Commodore 64, VIC-20, you name it, ZX Spectrum, Amstrad, every computer, including the PDP-10 and all the mainframes, and all the mini terminals that came out at the end of the 1970s, like Sol 20. So that's the TRS-80 version of this particular game. So it was a very important game, including Zork as well, which obviously pioneered much of these early computer video games.
Well, with Zork, at least I know, like, you're to me, this is a game where it's just like you get all these things. It's like, well, your empire is doing this, you're making this many goods and everything, and then you're just like, how many goods do you want to make? And you're like, well, I don't know, 50, and it's not so much the text input, it's just the lack of context in what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm sure that HAMmurabi, maybe if you bought if you bought a box copy, you got sort of the backstory, you got some feelies and things that would improve the situation, not unlike Zork in those games. But yeah, I mean, I feel like this was really just kind of it was a very, very old school game without the things that made the old school game playable back in the day, which was the feelies, etc.
And taking a look at the comments, overall, it's a cheap gimmick. Basically, ham mode is a cheap gimmick. Also, drops Hi Brother Bill. Music's okay, but it gets a bit repetitive. Well, they are really long, about 8 to 10 minutes each, the modules. But if you're playing the game for 15 minutes or whatever it is, then they will loop. So I guess that's a point. But I did try to make sure that they were a bit longer than usual, because it's long again. I hope RJ, an ultra legend in the computer field, I would bow down to him. I also hope RJ. Yeah, great. Hazza Patty says, yeah, I am with him. So another one saying it's not very good. Nightboat, good meditation. Captain John Arcus says, Amiga, to which Nightbot said, Amiga. It's cool, just not my thing. I said, it's also got a blind mode, which is actually on the screen at the moment, using this translator device. So for this one, you might think it's just a page full of text, but every single line of the 1978 version of the game, which this is with the green screen, every single line I had to use the narrator device basically to speak that line. So I couldn't just type the words in and say speak that, because it wouldn't have made any sense, and it wouldn't have been able to pronounce HAMmurabi or Morristown, Pennsylvania, or New Jersey. So what I had to do is that I had to split every line off line by line and to speak them phonetically. So creative computing, I had to literally type it out phonetically. More is town, so it would actually say that, and not just more is ton or whatever it said. I had to do it phonetically. New Jersey, I'd say Jersey or something like that to make it pronounce it right. So I had to do that every line by line for the entire thing, and it speaks it line by line for the blind. Unfortunately, it still needs a sighted person to launch the game, so it's not completely for the blind, and it means obviously blind can't activate or use graphic user interfaces like Workbench, so it's not like they could just put a disc in and launch this from their Amiga, particularly unless it was a real Amiga and a real disc. Otherwise they wouldn't be able to put it on Workbench and run it in blind mode in the first place because they're blind. But it was an idea, and it did get mentioned, not by these guys on this stream, but it did get mentioned in the comments a bit later on. So that's one of the things that I'm happiest about with the game, the blind mode, which speaks line by line in their language, and it has to emphasise certain words as well. Try your hand at governing ancient Sumeria. You know, if I'd have asked the narrators to speak that, it would have said try your hand at governing ancient. So I had to put little higher and lower, uppercase and lowercase in there to give it inflections so that it would sound, you know, happy, sad, upset, whatever the line is talking about. HAMmurabi, don't do that, we've only got 60 grain left. You know, I had to do that so that it would speak it naturally. So that's a hidden part of the game. It's a big thick part of it. It took me a long time, and it's not really apparent unless you actually play it. So definitely those voice speech sampled sound effects. It's also got a blind mode. I'm not a fan of these recent ham games, says Indie Retro News. The only one I did enjoy was Star Wars. Well, the recent Star Wars game, as far as I know, was created in extra half bright because it's a lot clearer and sharper than my video. I think that was extra half bright interlaced IFF, and it wasn't actually ham video. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure the Star Wars was a lot, well, it was miles too clear to be actual ham, with no interlace artifacts or ham artifacts on it. So definitely it wasn't. I think it was Anim 6, and ham can't do Anim 6, unfortunately. So in the Retro News, wrong about that. So the recent ham games, I'm not a fan. Hi Captain John Archer. Also the Crisis one, no thanks. So really huge support there from Indie Retro News, which is supposed to back independent old games, independent retro community stuff. So huge support there from Indie Retro News. I played Zork on my PDP-10, and the original Zork, it was awesome. I have that somewhere on my computer, played it. Watch podcast Bill stream by subscribing to his YouTube channel. DMackey828 says Empire on the old BBS days was awesome. BBS was dial-up service, but it was based on old mainframe technology. You could still only interact with it with text mode. I definitely remember the old bulletin board services, which used dial-up, and it used to cost a fortune, of which I had to pay my mum back. So definitely the old modem noises, definitely remember that from back in the day. Empire, as you've already seen on the floor chart, was a forerunner to all of the space adventure RPG games in existence. So definitely Empire was played on all those old computers. So D-Mac, you definitely remember Empire, is saying. Thanks for the support, it was just meant to be fun. I said back to Indie Retro News, the home of support of Indie Retro. And Mick Smith says, it makes me chuckle that the title bar in the stream is there in part because of the fella in the middle right. And what he's talking about is RJ Michael, who wrote Intuition, which is the Amiga Workbench bar you can see at the top. But Intuition is kind of the preemptive multitasking part of the Amiga. It's not actually the GUI, which you see at the top of the screen, although the GUI uses Intuition because it uses real-time updates for the memory and everything else, so it's actually using Intuition to update the GUI, if you can get your head around that. But anyway, RG Michael wrote a 1,000-page, 1,000-volume, 1,000-line, million-line code called Intuition. He stuck that into the ROM, and that's the preemptive multitasking. Only that guy in the world knows how to think about any of that kind of stuff. So we're very lucky to have him on this panel. So that's Boats of Coy's opinion of the game.
Fair play, Boat. Thank you for the critique. Appreciate that. So it's RJ, go for it. Sorry, sometimes I start reading the chat and I get distracted. Voxel Trots asked you a question actually, RJ. How do you feel seeing full screen Amiga games? Like,
oh, I love that. I'm not able to keep up with the chat. I have to admit, too many things going on.
It's hard.
I can't read the chat and watch the games and listen to the discussion.
No, don't worry about it. No, that's why I flagged it for you because that's a good question.
How do I feel about what? About seeing these full screen games?
Yeah, Amiga games in full screen and the full motion video and yeah.
Yeah, all of that stuff is just amazing, isn't it? My God, I mean, it's not the original, but in many ways, boy, am I happy it's not the original. I went back the other day and tried to watch my old Simpsons VHS tapes that I had recorded off of the television, Simpsons episodes recorded off of the television onto VHS tape. Man, it just hurt my eyes to look at that stuff. It was almost a traumatic experience to put myself through that again. So just loving this stuff, just loving seeing this, yes. And this game,
definitely, that's a fair point. This was rendered at something like 320 times 200. So that means that only 320 pixels across and only 200 pixels down. So to give you an idea, I think this is being rendered in 4K, even though it's only a 2K video. But in real time, that would be somewhere like here, 320 pixels and 20 pixels down. So it would be like here in the top corner of the actual video, and then it's stretching that to full screen with, unfortunately, not full screen depth, because I did a lot more frames per second in it, but I forgot to add the extra vertical to make it actually full screen, so you still get the big black border at the bottom. I could have fixed it, but I didn't. I thought, well, people on the Amiga 1200 might be struggling to play it, so I'm going to reduce the frames and I'm going to reduce the size of the video. But for what it is, I mean, look at that full colour ham, 4096 colours, photorealistic quality. I mean, alright, it's got a few artifacts on the side, it's got interlace artifacts where it's trying to high res everything. But believe you me, this on a 1985 built computer using 1985 technology was the future. Compared to the TRS-80 from 1978, this was light years away. Compared to the Commodore 64 from 1983, this was light years away. So he's saying, well, this isn't on the Amiga 1000, but it could have been on the Amiga 1000 because the only limitation of playing this video is the fact that it needs Kickstart 3. So if you put Kickstart 3 on Amiga 1000 and half mega memory, it should play it because it streams it from memory in real time, puts it on the disc, puts it into a buffer and plays it in real time, you shouldn't need that much memory to play it. So in theory it should be possible to play this game on the original Amiga.
It's like this kind of game, but you know, Zork didn't draw you pictures. Later games drew you pictures. Zork did not. You had to draw the pictures in your head. And this kind of game for me always has that kind of appeal where it's my own world, it's my own head, it's my own imagination. It's not where you're drawing these wonderful pictures for me, and they are beautiful. But the other stuff that we saw earlier that showed actual movies with actual interesting animations and stuff like that, much more interesting than this was for me. And you know, but it was, you know, it was. I didn't feel like this was a sequel or not to the game. I guess you could call it that. I didn't think about that this much. For me, it was more about just not my kind of game, not a very interesting experience for me in that sense.
Well, so opinions there from RJ Marshall saying it's the best game ever. So sharing back to the comments, it makes me chuckle. Alright then. You need a manual for this one, says Night Shift, I think it says. Yeah, definitely a tutorial mode would have helped, where you just basically guiding somebody through it, how to play it. But then again, I decided against that, because if you tell anybody how to play, all you need to do is select no to the first two answers, 1000 and 1000 to the next two answers, and all you need to do is do that to beat the game. Then everybody just do that and think, oh well, there's nothing to it. They won't actually learn how to play the game, and that's what it boils down to. But I can't actually say, right, that's all you need to do. So I've wrote all that on the itch page for people that want to know how to just dive in and complete it, but I didn't put that in the actual game itself. So that's the first point. It needed a manual or some kind of a walkthrough and a guide, and seeing as I'm the walkthrough and the guide guy, and you're looking at the walkthrough and the guide as printed in the game right now, you'd have thought I'd have put through some kind of thing. But again, if you make the game too easy, then there's no point in playing it. So I decided against that. Hi guys, it's HAMmurabi, sorry, because they're pronouncing it a different way. That's S-Cordian. Unfortunately it's put HAMmurabi, so it could actually read like HAMmurabi because it's a capital A. So HAMmurabi is not how you pronounce it. You might think it's Arabian, so that's what it is. No, this is before Arabia. This is 200 BC or 2000 BC or whatever, before Arabia. And HAMmurabi was the name of a guy, of a leader, of a king of the Sumeria region, which is now modern day Iran. So HAMmurabi, no idea. HAMmurabi, it should have been A-B-B-E-Y, HAMmurabi. Anyway, pronouncing it, who cares? It's the Sumeria game. Join Amiga Bill. The Wandering Warlock says, love the use of the Amiga speech synthesis. So you saw on the last screen, I had to line by line, speak it, print it, and that took quite some time. Thanks for mentioning that. That's the highlight of the game for me. Indie Retro News says, in reply to my thanks for your support comment, no worries dude, just a personal choice. Well, obviously this guy Indie Retro News, he's never coded anything, and definitely if you're a coder, I mean, I was in the same boat. Before I started coding, I used to rain down on all of these games saying all the rubbish, but as soon as I started coding and made those mistakes and banging my head against brick walls and bashing those brick walls down and just doing it anyway, then I really did uncover a huge new level of appreciation, depth of appreciation for these games that I never got before. Simply because now I'm a coder, it means I know how hard it is to put something on the screen and to code all this stuff, all the easy stuff that you think is pretty easy. You know, it took me ages even just to format these words so they'd fit on the page, get rid of the background and the border, get rid of the invisible hand bleed which is on there. You can still see a little bit of the hand bleed, but I've masked it so you don't notice it. I had to mask this in one colour, I masked this in a different colour, I masked that in the green and then masked that in the blue, and you can still see a green line there where I've tried to mask it, and I had to do it on this side as well, and that side, and all the other things. Otherwise you get streaks on it. You can still see the different colours there as the little streaks come down and ruin the entire effect, but I put a line there so it didn't matter in that. Put a line there and a bit of blue, so I had to trace around the entire thing invisibly just so that this page didn't look horrific. So yes, it took that work, all of which is invisible, but unless you're a recorder in the retro news of anything, and I don't mean just a construction set, and I certainly don't mean, you know, something like Backbone, you can just put some graphics in it and create a game. I mean base level, typing stuff in from rock bottom, like Basic or Can Do or Amos. That would be fantastic, and then you'd suddenly turn around and say, hey, wait a minute, coding these games is actually a nightmare, I'm surprised anybody does it. Hats off to these people, this is ultimate. But this was only a 2-week game, so he's not going to say that even if he was a coder, because it's not very good. So, no worries, personal choice. Mike Smith said, Amiga Bill, makes me chuckle at the tar bar. Ah, right, he's saying it twice. Unfortunately, Amiga Bill didn't actually read that. It would have been nice to hear that question. Porthol says, have you ever heard anything more, speaking to Indie Retro News, have you heard anything more about the HAMmurabi game that you reviewed on your site? Unfortunately, the HAMmurabi game, the coder behind that said it was a prototype. It was never meant to be a full game. It was always meant to be just a prototype to see if a ham game was possible and to blank out all the artifacts, and it was possible. So he's basically saying, have you heard anything more about this prototype which was never meant to be a game? Unfortunately. Yeah, that was futuristic for sure. That's replying to the Empire game, the space game on the PDP-10 by D. Mackey. Give Bill a tip. Well, it's very difficult to juggle balls and do this and read the comments and everything else at the same time, because you've got volume balancing from all these people, you've got mic inputs and stuff like that, video feeds to look after, and you've also got things that are placed on the screen resized as well in the correct position. You've got to type that thing in at the bottom as well. You've got to look at the comments as well whilst all this is going on, and you've got to stick to the schedules, time limit, time everything out so that everything's all right. You also have to sort it all out from your own room, which is it was using instead of his usual place. So it's like juggling about 8 balls for Amiga Bill, so it's little wonder they didn't have time to read those comments. Very difficult. In fact, at the time, I didn't read the comments either, and that's why I'm reading them back now. It's very difficult. So, anyway, that's a tip. Greetings from Corball and Brother Bill, which are Amiga Bill's minions. They follow him around like little minions wherever he goes. Followers, great to have followers. I mean, Indie Retro News, Porthol, talking, have you ever heard anything about HAMmurabi? Nothing. There are a few games that have never been finished. Not just ham games, but quite a few games that have never been finished. So the readers get a bit disgruntled if the games are actually going to be finished or not. So yeah, that's definitely a fair point. Sometimes the readers say, when's it going to be finished? When's it going to be done? And as soon as you say the game's getting towards finished, they get more and more disgruntled about it. So if the games are actually going to be finished, you get more abuse than if it's just a prototype. So that's why I made a separate prototypes section on the new Amiga games releases section of Lemon Amiga in the games section, so that all the prototypes and all the mini games can be put together. So that's where HAMmurabi went as far as I know, but that's definitely a point from Indie Retro News there. Sometimes it's better to just play around and create these dabbling examples rather than go to the trouble and the infuriation of people saying, when's the game going to be ready? Comment from D Mackie about this Empire thing. It was the best part of every day. Beating up my friends, lol. So he's talking about Empire on the BBS system. So I thought I meant the PDP-10 system on his school, but obviously he meant some kind of thing that you ring around, maybe on the Amiga, so all your friends, and you get to fly around in space, beat up on each other. So yeah, it's very kind of 1978 kind of an era. And then somebody called Life School says, wow, this is the worst game in the compo for sure. Definitely agree with that one. And Portal says, I see about Hamlet.
Fair play. Thank you, RJ. Dan, how you feeling about this one?
Yeah, it's not the kind of game that I would play. It's not the kind of game I've probably played much in the past either. Although I did like the ham full motion video stuff, and I like the use of ham. You know, it's quite rare to see ham used effectively in a game. So it's, you know, it gets quite a few brownie points for that.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. There's not too many games done in ham, let alone done well. So I think the fact that I used like Can Do definitely, you know, helped with that. But it was, it's cool. I love the. I'm such a sucker for ham fringing. I love. Back then I was like, oh, it was a detriment. But today it brings back a lot of fuzzy vibes. I totally dig it. All right, let's. Dan. Dan said this is the worst game in the compo. That's the creator, Dan. Dan from Lemon. Dan, you have to give yourself more credit, man. I like what you do. I'm glad that you make these games, and I think they're cool experiments. You know, I think they're cool experiments. So, Boat, how did you get any good deductions at least when you were playing this game?
Listen. I love Dan. Dan is the man. Okay. I've relied upon his expertise. Plus, he practically runs Amiga, or Lemon Amiga. Tim Lemon is off on some yacht somewhere, you know, celebrating his riches, while Dan is slaving away with the day-to-day stuff. So, listen, I don't want this to reflect on Dan at all as a person. It's 1 star.
Fair play. Fair play. 1 deduction for vote on the taxes. RJ, how you feeling about it?
About what for score?
Yeah.
Oh, 3.5. I would go 4, except it's not my kind of game. But at least 3.5 because it's a good version of this kind of game.
Fair. The other Dan the other Dan Lemon.
I'll give it a 3. I mean, mainly for the use of ham. You know, it's just nice to see ham being used. It's a difficult mode to work with. You know, it's very almost impossible sometimes. And yeah, they pulled it off there. And yeah, as a follow-up to a game, it does what it says on the tin.
Yeah, excellent, Dan. Appreciate that. So the other Dan, the creator of the game, gives it a 0.1 score. Oh, Dan, you're too hard on yourself.
I love you,
Dan. You're too hard on yourself. I love the train game. The Trans-Pennine Express is awesome. That one hits me right in the heart because my dad loved trains, and I know if my dad was alive, he would love playing your game, Dan.
So just a quick note about RJ's point about playing the game using your imagination. It's a fair point, definitely, but kids today, let's face it, haven't been brought up with the books and the kind of imagination that we had back in the day. But if you said to somebody of any age, imagine what ancient Sumeria was like 2,000 years ago, they might think, well, where in the world is Sumeria, for one thing. So if you explain to them that it was in the Middle East, people might think that it was kind of a desert landscape like this with some palm trees on it and some nice water and lots of land. And that's as far as their imagination would probably take them. And I put the introduction on though with a big temple on it to show people that actually people were living in cities back then. Civilization was created all the way back then. So I kind of gave that away in the intro. But if you look at this picture, this is probably a picture that describes the landscape amongst others, probably on the better side. So you can see people going around. Of course, this is a modern artist's impression of it, and you can see everybody is topless. They're just wearing a loincloth, and they don't have anything covering their legs, and they might have some kind of leather on the feet. And you can see that, well, they didn't have sun cream in those days, so people's skins had to be a lot darker than it shows in this picture, because if you've ever been out in a hot country with no sun cream on for 10 minutes, your skin is burning like crazy. So if you can imagine these out in a hotter climate than that, you're talking about maybe 120 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade, then these people must have had much darker skins. And you can see they've all got close cropped hair and things like that. Well, most people had longer hair than that, and quite longer hair with the beards and moustaches and everything like that. They didn't have access to razors. You can see people in the foreground have obviously shaved with a razor, and didn't have razors back in those days. You can see that the fields is square and everything's really industrious. That's why we've got square towns and square houses, from the fact that people lined things up and made these square shapes. So fields are square and things like that because of this. People liked this geometry, and it's geometry that of course propelled mankind into the future. You can see everybody working the fields. I've no idea how much of this grain gathering that they did back in the day, but you can see other fields as well in the background, things going on, and you can see it looks like a flock of birds or a flock of geese or something like that, which are, you can see the man there is a lot taller than whatever these are. So they did have livestock. You can see they are using a chain of mules to industriously move the grain from one place to another so they can grind it down. So this gives you an idea. They weren't a backwards people, they were very industrious, and you can see that they're moving through this grain on an industrial level, and grain is definitely the core of the game, buying and selling bushels of grain. And in the background you can see some boats with round hulls. That's why boats have got round hulls today. They could have made square boats, they could have made boats that did anything, but they made them round, and that's why aircraft are also round to this day. So you can imagine those early boats paved the way for what we've got right now, and these square streets and everything else, clothing, everything else, even though that was 4,000 years ago, it still paves the way for what we've got right now. So if I didn't show these images in the background, people might wonder precisely how civilization got along in those days. Was it a backwards society? Well, no, it was quite modern compared, and they didn't have hygiene standards, and they didn't have things that we take for granted today, but they did have most of the modern amenities, including cities and pure running water and sanitation, things like that. And so anyway, let's look at the comments. Amiga Bill, voxel trots. I like the presentation of it. Definitely this is kind of a, but it's kind of a jumped up slideshow, really, isn't it? You can make this using Scala or any kind of multimedia package. It just simply shows an image in the background, and then it prints some text on the screen, and then you can basically click on something. So I could have used PowerPoint to create something like this, showed something in the background, showed some information. I could have used anything, but I used Can Do. So yeah, basic presentation there. But that's what it is. Replying to Live School, worst game in the competition is going Acid Bottle says, take skills, please don't be hard on yourself. Well, I'm learning Can Do. I've no incentive to learn any other language at the moment, because every other language that I learn is too hard for my feeble brain, and I can't do what I want with it without having to go through a whole lot of other stuff. And you might think, well, it's easier, isn't it, if you can move sprites around the screen and create any game you want? Yeah, but the limitations of Can Do means that you have to get around obstacles to create the game that you want. And so far I haven't found any game that I wanted to make that can't be done in Can Do, because I'm interested in creating platformers and shooters and people that think that games are like that, really. You know, I've no interest in those types of games. My games are always kind of a bit deeper and more strategic. So a point and clicker like a mouse, like an adventure that I've created already. I mean, I have created the Dizzy game, Dizzy 1. So I'm not saying it's not possible. But Voxel Trots liked the presentation, and Acid Bottle saying, I need more skills, but please don't be hard on yourself. Is Z Top Dog? As Top Dog says, great work, thanks a lot. Brother Bill, I like the presentation, so he's condoning that. Ghetto Finger Gaming, I need Leisure Suit Larry redone. Extra sus go. Well, it wouldn't be hard to imagine a Leisure Suit Larry game, Leisure Suit Larry, with because I've already done the Monkey Eye game. So you could do that in a ham kind of a, or at least even a 64 colour half bright mode, ham character, digitised background so it's in an actual city. When he's talking to people, it's actually a person talking to actual people in a cutscene. That's not hard, and pointing and clicking on stuff and getting feedback, that's not hard either. So yes, it would be possible to do a ham version, full colour digitised modern graphic video of Leisure Suit Larry using Can-Do. Extra sus go, no idea what that means. Zap McRae says 2 out of 5 for me, which is 40%, which is probably where I would actually rate it. It's not diabolical, but it's not anything that you could replay. Once you've played something like this, you play it once and it's like, nah, I'm not playing that thing again. So definitely 40% for its replay value alone, 10% for the intro, 10% for the speech, 10% for the backgrounds and the ham, so 40%. D Mackie says, Dan may be the man, but I am the man. No idea whether the icon is actually him. Maybe it is. Pred said from Lemon Amiga says, from all the games Life School made so far, I like the train game most. That's the Transparent Express. And that's good because I started that before I started all this lot, and then I broke off to make Crisis for this competition, but it wasn't suitable, so I broke off to make this game for the competition, and then when I finished that I went back to Crisis, and then when I finished that I went back to Transparent Express. So I was kind of desperate to get through one thing, to get to another, all the way through the line. And as soon as Crisis was up to a standard that I liked, that I could say it was finished, then I went back to the train game. And the train game is interactive live video. We can speed it up and slow it down, you know, all these kind of things make it judder. So it's a step up from the rally game, where I simply had the player pull left and right and it didn't interact with the video whatsoever. So interactive video is definitely a step up, and I tried to make the video go up and down, but I couldn't. All I could do was to make the video run faster and slower. So definitely the train game is the height of my capabilities so far. Definitely interactive full motion video now means I can do a Dragon Slayer type game, where it shows something in the background and the player pulls in the background and then it quits and shows a cutscene. So now it means finally I can do those types of games, which means it's a lot more interesting basically than the games I'm putting together at the moment. All I need to do is to figure out a way to turn the mouse pointer on, and then we can make an interactive light gun game like you saw on the consoles, where we've got a light gun and we can shoot cops in real cities shooting the bad guys. And so that would be another project, some kind of digitized ham or high colour interactive movie type game. That's a lot more interesting than a platformer to me. So that came from that. Great work, thank you very much. Leisure Suit Larry, Dance the Man, the train game. Oof. Indie Retro News says oof. Probably reacting to some kind of comments from the guys. Probably IJ Michael when he said 3.5 out of 5. which is over 50%, a long way over 50%, he probably went oof at that. Again, I used to be as cynical as he was until I actually tried to program something, and then I ate all of my words completely. So now I'm saying 0.1 score for me, life school. 0.1 score. Well, you could see and say it as I basically lifted the basic code and put a background behind it, so I did nothing whatsoever. I just put the old game on it, but I did create the kingly duties where people can say, you know, a lion arrives, a stranger arrives, a boat arrives, what do you do? And it's down to pot luck. You might get nothing, you might get something, you might get a detriment. So if you get nothing, you haven't lost anything, so you usually gain something, but sometimes not. So a lion arrives, what happens? A lion chases away all the rats, 0 grain lost on the next turn. So the kingly duties add another layer to the game, and when I was just saying it really didn't feel like a sequel to me, well, that was my extra layer, the kingly duties. So you've got the economy mode, but the kingly duties mode on top of that. So that adds another layer. It's not much of an extra layer, but that was my 2 on the HAMmurabi 2 idea, adding the kingly duties from games such as Castles and Castles 2, which I love. So that was my idea, that's why it's the sequel. I haven't just put it in there, I've added a bit to it. But behind the scenes, it really did take a lot of work to get this working, and that's why the boxes go off the screen, otherwise they'd create hand bleed, and that's a compromise I had to make. And the fonts aren't readable either, sorry about that. But I wanted as much of the image on screen as possible, so if the fonts were down here, there wouldn't be much point having an image, would there? So I made them as small as possible, even though it's a huge, great big screen resolution. You can see by this normal font at the bottom. It's ham, so it's only 360 across by 200, or whatever it is. So I used an extra small font, the smallest font I could find in the world, and that's why it's virtually unreadable. So anyway, Mod 3 MDG KG says towards me, you rule. Your game is better than mine because I didn't enter a game into the Amiga Game Jam. For a point. I didn't finish any games for the Game Jam. For a point. And Acid Bottle is presumably laughing at that. So that's maybe even a side comment to Indie Retro News. He didn't even put a game in, so that's fine. Indie Retro News, 1 star, North and South game was scored too highly. Well, the North and South game was an Advanced Wars game, which is more advanced than this type in text adventure. So North and South Wars I would rate higher than my game because it's a real time, well, it's not actually real time, but it's a full battle sim like I'm trying to do with my King Arthur game, so it's definitely a step above a type-in game like this. So 1 star, North and South was scored too high. Well, for me, I'd score North and South higher than my game. And Amiga Nick is saying +1 to my 0.1 score for me. Comment, Voxel Trots, ham is tasty. Certainly does, but it does bleed everywhere. And leave stringy lines everywhere that get stuck in your teeth, so you need a toothpick to go around getting rid of all that ham bleed. Which I managed to do mostly with the Crisis game. Indie Retro News 2 to 2.5. So that's less than my 4, but that's still better than my 0.1, so that's still better than my estimations, so that's good. I'll accept that. 2 to 2.5. This game, it didn't appreciate the blind mode or the kingly duties. In fact, I'm surprised if he even played it, because this definitely wasn't featured in Indie Retro News. None of my games have ever been featured in Indie Retro News. Squiggle Crunch at me says kudos for using Can Do. Definitely major kudos there. I could have created this in Amos in 2 seconds, but the fact that I use can do, that's definitely a tip of the hat, isn't it? 1 for me too. 1 from Mr. Edwin Helland. Edwin Helland. And Brother Bill says, I like the ham with the text adventure. So, maybe I could do a text adventure in ham. That would definitely be a step up, wouldn't it? Anyway, let's get back to the comments and the ratings of this game.
The rally game. The rally game is it's a really unique way to like incorporate full motion video into an Amiga game. And the Crisis was fun too. How they're like event-driven games. That's pretty cool, Dan. But keep up the great work and love me some ham. Amiga Cami, what did does the Amiga community like the ham? 2.8. 2.8. Right on. All right.
2.8.
Keep up, Dan. Keep up the great work, Dan. Appreciate your games and obviously all you do for Lemon Amiga. Submissions to Amiga Game. There we go. All right. Insanity Fight 2 by Rehash. Let's take a look at the video. This is this is Amiga Factory again.
So that was the end of my recording. There were a few comments after that saying one thing and another. Can do rocks. Can do rock. I think I meant to put rocks in. Thanks everyone, too kind. And I normally like ham with sandwiches, but in this case I liked ham in this game. Alright, great stuff. I mean, as I say, nobody uses ham anymore, so that's why I wanted to use it. There's no excuse to not use it as long as you mask everything out. So that's what I did. So it was quite novel. I could have done just a very similar job using extra half bright mode, but again, you're still looking at 320 pixels across. So even though it would have been much sharper and clearer, you're still limited by the fact of that. And 64 colours, well, you might as well have 4096 and put it with a bit of blur, so that's what I did. So thank you everybody for rating the game. I think it got a final rating of somewhere like 3 out of 10, which is fine. So I was, I think, 4th from the bottom in the competition. This was just meant to be a joke, Me Too kind of throwaway game, so if anybody's played it whatsoever, I'd be surprised. I'm not really bothered about me playing it ever again, although I'd probably like to play any of my other games. It's probably my least favourite, to be honest. So even Holiday is better than this thing, miles better. So anyway, thank you for viewing my reaction video to these comments. RJ Michael himself, the creator of my life himself, commenting about my game. So I only have one regret. I wish I'd have entered Crisis instead and come up with some excuse to enter that, because at least that would have meant RJ would have seen the full motion video and the ham shooter, which would have made him really laugh. And everybody said, oh yeah, that's really impressive. So that would have been a much better game to enter, I think, for this thing, rather than what I did enter. But anyway, thanks everybody, and we'll see you again in another video at some point, sometime soon.